office here in Chicago. And his topic today is the MacArthur Foundation, a 40-year legacy of social impact. The session, as you know, is going to be recorded, and he's going to share with us some of the aspects of the MacArthur Foundation, where it's been, where it's headed, and talk with us, and he'll be answering any questions we have. And just as a FYI, there were several of us who went to the Smart Museum of Art at UChicago back in November, and we viewed the Toward Common Cause Art, Social Change, and the MacArthur Fellows exhibit, which was put on and is still up, I think, till sometime in December. But we had a great time. We had lunch at the refectory at the Lutheran Seminary. So we all had a good time, and MacArthur Foundation was the supporter and the instigator of that collection. So Don, take it away.
All right, well, thank you everyone for being here today. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if this is gonna work. And are you seeing a title page now?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the MacArthur Foundation as well as the MacArthur Fellows Program, which is the program within the foundation where I work. Hang on a second. So the MacArthur Foundation, in terms of its work, is organized really in, I guess you could say, 4 buckets. We have big bets, that's one way of working. We have enduring commitments, which is another way of working. And these two represent the primary modes of our work. We also have field support and then awards, of which the MacArthur Fellowship, which technically is an award, it's not a grant in the same way that our other programs operate. We're a fellowship program, which is an unrestricted purse that recognizes exceptionally creative individuals as opposed to organizations. So the big bets and the enduring commitments support organizations, whereas the Fellows Program supports awards. And in terms of the big bets, which have right now 10-year time horizons, more or less. Each big bet is reviewed periodically. So there's an initial stage at 5 years. There's a review with the board to get a sense of whether or not the strategy is affecting the outcomes that were hoped. And then at 10 years, there's the opportunity either to extend, pivot that work, or possibly close that work and move on to other big bets. So currently, our big bets are climate solutions, criminal justice, nuclear challenges, and on Nigeria. Yeah. Climate solutions works to prevent climate change by curbing emissions and supporting global leadership on climate solutions. Our criminal justice program focuses on jails, and it's a national program that really addresses the problem of over-incarceration and racial and ethnic disparities within that context. And its work is to help Americans think differently about how jails are used in this country. Nuclear Challenges focuses on decreasing the availability and use of weapons usable materials. Oh. And on Nigeria is really focused on corruption and helping to support the eradication of corruption in Nigerian-led efforts to help strengthen accountability, transparency, and participation.
Wow. Wow.
And our enduring commitments currently, which means these are not time horizon based programs. These are areas of work that the foundation has committed to right now in perpetuity. And those two commitments are Chicago and journalism and media. As you know, MacArthur has been very involved with journalism and media, supporting NPR in the early days, as well as Chicago, our home city. So Chicago and journalism and media are core to what the foundation does, and the work that we continue to do. And the Chicago commitment is deep and enduring, as I said, with support to creative and effective organizations working to improve the quality of life and the prospects for residents and make our hometown a city where opportunity is equitable and justice can thrive. So this speaks to the sort of overarching theme today of social impact and MacArthur's legacy there. And journalism and media, our program in that area works to strengthen American democracy by informing, engaging, and activating Americans through deep investments in independent journalism and media. Field support is another way that we work. And I can't speak too much to impact investments, but that's a primary mode of our work here, which is really helping to build the field of impact investing and providing catalytic capital to address social and environmental challenges around the world. It's very technical, and my background is in the arts. So if the Chicago Hyde Park Village has an opportunity to get somebody from impact investments to speak more about that program, that would be great. And I don't want to say anything that's wrong there, so I'll just leave it at that. Field support is also broadly in the philanthropic sector, and that's a program that we're developing. It's been a part of it, but I think we're being more, what's the word, intentional about our work there. And that means research and supporting institutions that think about philanthropy broadly, not just the nonprofit sector, but the broader philanthropic sector that supports those sectors. And it's sort of like a meta type of program that aims to support broadly how philanthropy is changing, how it's evolving, and to lead in that field, to help support other institutions think about that as well. And a newer effort that MacArthur is engaged in now is technology in the public interest. And it's really working to strengthen research and advocacy, addressing the social impacts of technology. We also have awards. So there are only 2 awards programs right now at MacArthur. One is the 100 and Change competition, which is a competition for a single $100 million grant to fund a proposal that promises real and measurable progress in solving a critical problem of our time. And that will be the new 100 and Change program will be implemented in the next year or so. And the other awards program is the MacArthur Fellows Program, which I will take this opportunity to go into a little bit more. As I mentioned at the outset, the Fellows Program celebrates and inspires the creative potential of individuals through no strings attached fellowships. And what makes the MacArthur Fellows Program unique in the context of the foundation is its support of individuals as opposed to institutions. And before I get too much into the Fellows Program, which I'd like to dedicate time to in a few minutes, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the MacArthur Foundation's overarching way of working. And I want to focus now on what we call the just imperative. MacArthur's mission is to build a more just, we lead with justice, verdant, and peaceful world. And as we've defined it, the world is more just when actions are moral, rational, equitable, and fair. It's more verdant when the planet and its people flourish, and more peaceful when people are free from fear, conflict, violence, and war. And our mission leads with justice because we believe that justice is the essential condition for human dignity, equitable opportunity, and shared prosperity. We're also really focusing this year and into the future on living our mission. So justice is reflected in fairness, equity, equity, respect, humanity, and the elimination of past and present barriers to equitable access, treatment, consideration, and opportunity. And the just imperative requires that we think about our decisions intentionally and our actions, and that what we do enhances the conditions in which justice can thrive and thrive. We'll leave it with that. And now on to the MacArthur Fellows Program, which is my area of work. So the Fellows Program awards unrestricted fellowships to individuals who show extraordinary originality in their creative pursuits. The MacArthur Fellowship recognizes creativity across fields, which is a unique aspect or a notable aspect of the program, as opposed to a fellowship program that recognizes, say, work in the humanities or work in the arts or work in the sciences. The MacArthur Fellowship recognizes a cohort of fellows each year working across disciplines, and we strive to recognize as many disciplines as we can imagine. MacArthur Fellows receive a $625,000 stipend, which is no strings attached, another rather unique aspect of this program. Oftentimes, fellowship programs are based around projects with reporting, and our fellowship is really no strings attached. MacArthur Fellows are identified through a rigorous process carried out confidentially by a vast and ever-expanding network of nominators, evaluators, and selectors who work independently of the foundation. So a primary aspect of my job is basically scouring the country for people who might be in contact with really, really creative work in all areas, not just Chicago, to source nominations for people doing this work that we might not know about. I guess I'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit about humility and the MacArthur Fellows Program. Part of the no strings attached really has to do with the fact that we believe at the foundation that we might not have the best ideas. There are other people out there who dedicate their lives to specific areas of work that really know like how these funds could be. Yes, who are we to dictate what somebody can do? And we really want to let the individuals drive their own work in that spirit of humility. And the process extends from the foundation, but really goes out into the world. So we also rely on nominators, evaluators, and an independent selection committee to inform our work too. In many ways, the staff in the Fellows Program sort of takes a back seat, and we listen to others and respect others and their opinions so that we can hopefully arrive at a class of fellows that is representative not of the foundation, but of the broader country at large. And this is the way our process works. I touched on it a little bit. It begins with nominations. So every month, program staff send out nomination invitations to people across the country. I know we reach every state. That is a priority for us to make sure we're getting nominations coming in from every state. And once nominations come in, they are reviewed by at least 2 people in the program. Oftentimes, they are reviewed by more than 2 people in the program to get a sense of whether there's really exceptional creativity here. And that initial vetting takes place on part of the staff. We're the ones that are looking at the nominations that come in. Excuse me. And the most promising evaluations then are assigned to program officers, of which I am one, and we begin the external evaluation process. So a nomination will come in, it will be assigned to a program officer, and then we will start sending out evaluation requests from people in the nominees field, often is where it begins, but we also like to reach out just beyond the field. So to get a sense of whether or not work has impact, not just for a small cohort of individuals, but if it's reaching other fields and other disciplines, and people outside of it also are able to to find inspiration or meaning or findings that are relevant to their own work in the work of the nominee. After the evaluation process takes place, those that, again, seem to be the most promising, where there are plentiful, really positive evaluations that are, pointing out the creativity of that work. We then bring those nominations forward to our external selection committee, which meets quarterly. So we have a September, December, March, and May meeting every year. Our selection committee is interdisciplinary, and it's usually about 12 to 13 people on the selection committee, and they rotate off because we feel it's important to have different perspectives represented in that process. And the selection committee then votes in the September, December, and March meetings on a new slate of nominees at each of those meetings. And if they are passed through, they will go to the May meeting, which again, the May meeting is basically a kind of finalist type of meeting where everyone that's seen at that meeting has been seen at earlier meetings in the year, and the selectors believe that they were truly exceptional and they are now candidates for the actual award. And in May, the committee makes the selections, which is then approved by the foundation's board, and the fellowships are awarded and announced typically in late September or early October. And hopefully my technology will work, but I have a little overview video, which I think is terrific to share. Looks like it's working.
No sound.
Hang on. Can you hear now?
No.
No?
We can hear you, Don, but not the video.
The video. Okay, let me see if I can get the video to work.
There's something you need to push at the bottom. It's not an obvious button, but it's down there, I think, near the bottom of the setup screen.
Let's see.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You might need to restart your screen sharing and be sure to select audio to include.
Okay. So, share. Sorry, everyone.
No worries.
So where would the sound part be if I?
It's in the screen share dialog. If you click screen share, then in the bottom left corner is a little checkbox. Tiny little box.
Okay.
I'm a music critic, essayist, and poet.
Is that working?
Yep.
Great.
I'm a music critic, essayist, and poet.
I'm a writer and radio producer.
I'm a physician economist.
I'm a computational virologist.
I'm a poet and I'm a lawyer.
I am a painter.
I am a poet and translator.
I'm a biological physicist.
I am an art historian and curator.
I'm an independent documentary filmmaker.
I'm an American historian and writer.
I am a Puerto Rican artist.
I am a public historian.
I'm a civil rights activist.
I am a designer of accessible technologies for blind people.
I'm a neurologist, a neuro-oncologist, and a neuroscientist.
I am an internet studies and digital media scholar.
I'm a geomorphologist.
I'm a filmmaker and digital media artist.
I'm a landscape ecologist.
I'm an applied microeconomist.
I'm a film scholar, archivist, and curator.
I am a historian and a writer.
I'm a microbiologist.
I am a performer, dancer, teacher,
choreographer.
Health disparities in the United States are profound. I think physicians and economists are.
Oh, and I'll just back up for a second. We'll take a little bit of a deep dive, and the fellows that we just saw were the 2021 MacArthur Fellows. This was the class that was just announced. And right now I will show you 3 additional videos that delve a little bit deeper into the work of 3 of the fellows.
Health disparities in the United States are profound. I think physicians and economists are still struggling to understand the role that structural racism has played in the distribution of resources and the outcomes of illness or health. My name is Marcella Alshon, and I'm a physician economist. I study the causes and consequences of health inequality in the US and elsewhere, and solutions to give people the opportunity.
Looks like my internet is being slow now.
To live healthy, more productive lives. I first heard about the Tuskegee study when I was an undergraduate. It just seemed incredulous to me that up to 1972, this experiment had been ongoing where Black men in the South were not told that they were in an experiment, and in fact, they were actively deceived. And the goal of our analysis of the Tuskegee study was to show that there are consequences to exploitation and discrimination. In order for the medical care system to be trusted, it has to become more trustworthy. Preventative care has a very high return, and yet there are gaps in the take-up of preventative care across racial groups. I hope that my work provides rigorous evidence, not only what leads to health inequality, but what are the ways that we can address it.
And I think this will be directly to the next, no, it will not, okay. We'll go to the next fellows video. There we go.
In the last 20 years, we've had a number of these outbreaks: SARS-1, MERS, Zika, Ebola, swine flu, etc. And they will keep happening. But by studying these viral genomes, we can learn about how flu is spreading around the world, or how coronavirus is spreading around the world in a fashion that would be otherwise pretty mysterious. I'm Trevor Bedford, and I'm a computational virologist. You can sequence a virus's genome, and from that you can make these family trees that connect up different viruses, different infections, and that can tell you very important things that are not available any other way. This sort of approach to evolutionary tracking is useful for different viruses in different ways. Generally, with each virus, there'll be particular questions that people are interested in, and there's real kind of necessity to build these open source tools that public health and scientists throughout the world can use to understand how viruses are evolving and how they're spreading throughout the globe.
Good.
And we have one more.
In the last 20 years,
Cinema very quickly became a global phenomenon. And so as a mass entertainment, we have to really understand how it is that cinema appealed to people, how it has shaped people's senses of self. I'm Jacqueline Stewart, and I'm a film scholar, archivist, and curator. I work to try to reconstruct what was the connection between the audience and
Sorry, guys. Start this over.
Cinema very quickly became a global phenomenon. And so as a mass entertainment, we have to really understand how it is that cinema appealed to people, how it has shaped people's senses of self. I'm Jacqueline Stewart, and I'm a film scholar, archivist, and curator. I worked to try to reconstruct what was the connection between the audience and the filmmaker, because that's what the film really is. There are a number of early Black artistic pioneers who were making films for segregated African American audiences during the first half of the 20th century. There was a kind of mutual relationship that I think has been underexplored, the ways that Blackness influenced the development of cinema as a medium, and the way that cinema played an important role in the development of Black identity. You can love something through critiquing it, through engaging with these additional layers of meaning.
So I wanted to highlight those 3 videos just to give a sense of the breadth of the sort of work that the MacArthur Fellows Program recognizes. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not just one type of work, but it's creativity across disciplines, from a film scholar to a virologist. And that's really what makes the program exciting, I think. There's something that we have thought a lot about, and I think discovered in some ways, that there's benefit to bringing people working in very different areas together, and to put people who are filmmakers in conversation with poets, in conversation with physicists, I think is really meaningful. And that's something that's special about our program that we really like to highlight, and that we've learned over the years has the potential to, generate new kinds of ideas, and there's cross-pollination across disciplines. And we really love to see that. One of the hopes of the Fellows Program in terms of social impact is that by bringing these people with diverse expertise together, that we're able to start addressing issues that might seem intractable by having different perspectives on them. And, before I open it up for questions, I will speak a little bit about the exhibition Toward Common Cause, Art, Social Change, and the MacArthur Fellows Program at 40, which I know some of you had the chance to see at the SMART Museum. And sort of in the spirit of the Fellows Program, which is very broad, the exhibition not only took place at the SMART Museum really served as a kind of organizer for the broader exhibition, which included 29 MacArthur Fellows who are visual artists. So that was one organizing principle of the exhibition. They were artist fellows, but each of the artists actually work in ways that stretch beyond the visual arts. They were all artists that, touched on other ideas. Economics, for instance, climate was of interest to other artists. Environmental justice and indigenous rights were a theme that other artists worked on. And the exhibition also extended to 22 exhibition and programmatic venues. So it was quite an ambitious project. And I really have to commend the SMART and the team there. The curator was Abigail Winograd, who was hired for this project. She did a fantastic job of engaging these other institutions, and not just the institutions, but the communities that these institutions served and continue to serve. So as I mentioned, Toward Common Cause is spread across Chicago in venues ranging from traditional museum and gallery spaces to service organizations and public building facades, which is another really exciting aspect of this exhibition. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the Tribune today, but Lori Waxman, the critic for the Tribune, called out Toward Common Cause as one of the most ambitious and generous exhibitions this year. So we are really, really happy to get that acknowledgement. And the visuals here are just examples of some of the work that's been shown. On the top left, you see the installation of Kara Walker's work at the DuSable Museum. And then below that, you see the installation of Njideka Akinili Crosby's large-scale mural at the National Public Housing Museum. And the two images below on the left is an installation view at the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College, which included work by Shazia Sikander and Amile. And on the right is Carrie Mae Weems's installation at the Logan Center at the University of Chicago. So if you have not yet seen the exhibition, it is still up for a few more days. It closes at the SMART on December 19th. Some of the venues have already closed. And at the SMART, you can see work by 11 MacArthur Fellows. And broadly, the work there considers how race and class shape our rural and urban geographies. And here are two shots from the opening. This is an installation view at the DuSable Museum of African American History. Unfortunately, this closed on October 16th, but it was a presentation of a 1997 work by Kara Walker that was initially commissioned by the Renaissance Society at U of C. And it was installed here in the rotunda, the roundhouse, which just looked amazing. And it was great to see that. There was also programming involved with that where Kara talked more about her process with Hamza Walker, who was at the Renaissance Society at the time and has since moved to Los Angeles, where he's at LAX Art. And this is one of Njideka Akunyili Crosby's large-scale murals. This one is on the facade of the National Public Housing Museum. This project was really exciting because Njideka worked with students to help decide what the images that would be ultimately adhered to the facades of not only the National Public Housing Authority, but the mini Ripperton apartments owned by the Chicago Housing Authority as well. So this is an example of the real collaboration that took place between the SMART, the artist, in this case, Njideka, the Chicago Housing Authority, students, as well as residents at the mini Ripperton apartments. So that was something that the exhibition really tried to capture. We wanted to think about another way of exhibition making. So it's not so much top down where you have a curator in a quiet space that's telling people like what to see and what is important, and also driving people to a museum, but rather moving out into communities, listening, and then having the work sort of grow from the ground up. And this is another exhibition that's currently up again. This one closes soon, but there's still time to see it. Highly recommend. It's fantastic. It was, it's Wendy Ewald and Amalia Mesa Baines. It's a two-person show at Weinberg Newton Gallery. And what we're looking at are images that Wendy created in collaboration. And I should say, really, the students created these images, and Wendy just helped them realize their vision. So she was working with kids from Centro Romero, and the work explores personal challenges that these students, many of whom are immigrants, face. And the project as a whole was really meant to elevate those voices and to give them a platform to share their experiences and their hopes and their dreams. And this is the website for Toward Common Cause. Let me see if I can get this to work. No, that's okay. The address is www.towardcommoncause.org. And if you get to that site, let me just try one more time. There we go. Can you see the screen still?
Yep.
Great. So this is the website for Toward Common Cause. And these are the participating artists. I think my internet's being a little bit slow. So this is Njideka Akunyili Crosby, who worked with students to create the murals. Ida Applebrew, Dawood Bey, Mark Bradford. And these are all fellows from across the decades. I think each decade, the Fellows Program has been in existence since 1981, hence the 40th anniversary in 2021. And we have fellows from each of the decades represented in this show. So in much the same way that the Fellows Program represents a breadth of creativity, even within the microcosm of the arts, there's still a wide breadth of practices. So all of these artists are doing different sorts of work. We have photographers, we have painters, we have installation artists, we have social practice artists who the work actually is the social interaction between people. And artists who are engaged with many different sorts of issues. Trevor Paglin, who's here, really interested in the way technology is, infringing on personal rights and privacy. And Fazal is really interested in the way indigenous lands have been used and in certain cases abused in this country. Shazia Sikander, who is trained as a miniature painter in Pakistan, has turned that sensibility of miniature painting into these grand paintings that address what it is to make art as a woman and as a person of color here in the United States. So this is just a kind of overview of the sorts of artistic practices that the Fellows Program has represented. I'm going to go back here. And just to get a sense that much of the exhibition has closed now, the website will live on, so you can still get a sense of what took place this year in Chicago. And these are the partners, and you can just click on a link to get a little bit more information about them. And there's also a calendar, sorry about that, a calendar of events. There are 2 more events this year, both centered at the Stony Island Arts Bank on the 17th and the 18th. And if you're still available, you can click on these and register. And then the news function, gives a little bit more sense to learn more about what has been going on. So the Hyde Park Art Center had a really fantastic presentation of work by 3 fellows. The president of the MacArthur Foundation sat down for an interview with the University of Chicago to give a sense, of his take on this project and its importance to the foundation. And it goes on. So I think yep. Thank you for listening. And now I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm going to stop sharing this screen at this point.
Well, before we go there, I just want to highlight for those of us who live in Hyde Park and are close to University of Chicago, Jacqueline Stewart, who is a new fellow, is from University of Chicago. She's was on faculty and was a scholar in films, and has now, as you've seen, is in the Academy Museum in Los Angeles. So we don't know if she's coming back or if she's staying there, but she's there for now. And if you go ahead.
My understanding is that she was able to maintain her appointment at the University of Chicago, which is
that could very well
so
be. She was well esteemed, so I could imagine she should have negotiated a good contract. So, and who knows, that the day of Zoom, she might be teaching on Zoom from Los Angeles. But if you look at their website, they're quite an interesting new museum that's been started. It started in September of this year. And hopefully Barbara and I will be on vacation in February and get to go to the museum. That's one of our highlights for that time. Well, some questions?
So I just want to announce that I've muted people during the presentation. You can either raise your hand in front of your screen, or you can use the reaction button, raise your hand that way. Terry, did you have a question to kick us off?
Yes. So, Don, how has the MacArthur Fellows changed over the time and history? Or
Don, you're muted. Yeah.
That's a great question. Let me think about that for just a second.
Well, then there's a follow-up. So I don't know if you want to wrap them both together, but what might be under wrap or under consideration for a new, different possibility for the MacArthur Foundation?
Okay, now this gets me thinking. So in the early years, as I mentioned, the program announced its first class of fellows in 1981. And at that point, the fellows that were recognized were rather highly esteemed. It's a little bit hard to look back retrospectively because oftentimes even fellows that were at Kara Walker, for instance, who now, for those of you who are familiar with the arts sector, is you know, at the forefront of visual artistic practice. But at the time she was awarded the fellowship, I believe in 1991, she, I think, had only had one solo exhibition and was very new. And I think there was some questions from the media at the time, like, oh, well, is she really like that good yet? But as we've seen, she's sort of flourished into this, you know, larger than life presence through the amazing work that she has created. But I think in the early days, there was much more of an emphasis on accomplishment, on things that already had been accomplished. These are highly respected, regarded people, and that we were, you know, recognizing accomplishment. As the program has evolved over the years, certainly accomplishment is a part of the calculus, but promise for more future work increasingly is important. So we're always trying to find people, and this speaks to this larger sort of theme of social impact. We're always trying to find people at points in their career where the fellowship could make a huge difference. So that maybe it's somebody that, you know, that can't find the funding, like the way different funding structures work, because the ideas are so out there. That's where the MacArthur Fellowship can step in and like, here you go, do what you see fit with this funding to explore this crazy idea that you have. Sometimes it doesn't turn out. Sometimes it leads to, you know, breakthroughs, which is great. But we want to encourage that kind of creative thinking, and also enable impact. I see a question from Joe Marlin.
Yes, two, although the second one's unrelated to the first. If a person is nominated to be a fellow and does not succeed, can that person be renominated, or is it one chance and you're out kind of thing?
No, that's a great question. Once a nomination has been made, that nomination is always viable. The example that I like to give is, let's say we get a nomination saying that this young writer is about to write the next great American novel. And, you know, we're sort of, okay, this seems interesting. Yet, like, year after year passes, like the novel doesn't come out. So there's not much to go on. Then maybe a decade later, pieces of the novel start to come out. Then all of a sudden that nomination can be reactivated again based on the work. So once somebody has been nominated, that nomination is always viable. And oftentimes, since our nomination process is so extensive, we'll see multiple nominations for the same individual. Occasionally, we actually get nominations for people that have already been named fellows. At this point, we have over 1,000 fellows in our cohort, so it's quite extensive.
So they can't get a second fellow.
You can't get 2 fellowships.
Let me just ask one other thing. Is the fellowship taxable or no?
It is taxable income.
Yeah, I just wondered.
Yeah.
I have a question about the process.
Sure.
Once a person is nominated in your schematic drawing across the way, does the person actually ever know that they're in consideration?
Hopefully not.
We often read where either on the news or in the paper on TV, news on TV, that somebody says, well, I was doing such and such, and I wasn't going to answer the phone, but I went ahead and answered it. I'm a fellow.
Yeah. So the process it plays out confidentially. And there are two primary reasons for the confidentiality. The first is that our process really relies on candid and frank evaluations. So when we reach out to evaluators, we want to ensure that they feel safe providing whatever feedback they feel is appropriate. So we don't want evaluators to hedge their words for fear of some kind of professional retribution. So that's the primary reason why confidentiality is there. The other reason, well, there are actually three. The second reason I was going to mention is we get far more nominations than we could possibly award fellowships. And we would hate for somebody to find out that they've been nominated for the fellowship and then not get it. We really try to avoid that. And the third reason is the possibility of campaigns where you get a bunch of people like, we really want this person to get the fellowship. So if we reach out to them, that they'll nominate this person, and then they can let other people know who they think we might then reach out to evaluators. So we try to avoid that. We try to have the process as objective as possible. So those are the primary reasons why the confidentiality is in place. And we actually continue in this day of connectivity and network individuals. We are very happy that by and large, I've been at the program now for 8 years, and maybe there are only 2 or 3 cases in the 200 fellows that we have called to make this announcement to, where they had any inkling that they had been nominated. And usually it was like, yeah, a friend told me 3 years ago that he was asked to write a letter for me, but I didn't think anything of it because I didn't get the fellowship. And that actually speaks to the duration of our process too. So oftentimes files with the cases for nominations for the fellowship are developed over the course of many years. Sometimes a file will have evaluation letters going back a decade. So yeah, it's an extended process.
Other questions? Speak up.
I have one. Often I've heard them referred to as the MacArthur Genius Grants. And there's often a correction saying, no, it's really the MacArthur Fellowship. Just wondered what your thoughts were about how that got started and the impact of calling it the Genius Grants.
I think the Genius Grants all got started with the New York Times. This was back in the 80s, I believe. And I think initially the foundation was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So the correction wasn't there, but increasingly as we think about genius, that's really not what the program represents. So we try to answer your question directly, the foundation's line is, no, this is not the Genius Grants, this is the MacArthur Fellowship, and the MacArthur Fellowship recognizes exceptional creativity. There could be a correlation between genius and creativity, but rather than genius, we really want to focus on the creativity side, because genius also has a lot of different kinds of associations with it. And creativity seems really, more inclusive and broad. It's a broader category than genius, and we don't want to limit ourselves to this idea, the stereotypes of like the lone artists, kind of like
the Einsteins of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We want to be like, that would be wonderful. Einstein would have made a fantastic MacArthur Fellow, but at the same time, there are people doing really exceptional work, especially in some of the really socially impactful fields, like that work often isn't thought about in terms of like a breakthrough type of genius, but to lever governmental agencies, to build grassroots organizations, it takes some real work and creativity, and we want to be able to recognize that sort of work.
Well, what struck me about Dr. Alson was how she creatively reinterpreted the data from the Tuskegee experiment in a way that, even though the data's been around for a while, it had yet to be looked at that way.
That's right.
And where she's taking that whole thing about discrimination in healthcare, that's creative. That's very
exactly.
Creative.
Yep.
Well, it's social justice oriented.
Yeah. Other questions? Well, I can ask another one. Is there ever any discussion or effort about, given if that's a chunk of change to give someone unrestricted fellowship, and does anybody ever get caught up in how do we measure the impact, either at the personal level of the fellow or a broader societal or level?
Yes, we are always wondering about the impact. However, because of the no strings attached aspect of the fellowship, we have not undergone any sort of a systematic survey, but this is something that we continually think about. Thankfully, our board has not, I think they see the work of the fellows and are happy with that work that they see, so they haven't tried to meddle too much in our process. They just see the process seems to be generating people that are doing really impactful work. And really the way we measure that on a basic level is just sort of keeping informal tabs, like through the news, through media, and to see how projects develop over time. Mentorship is another component that we think about. Have scholars like taken on other younger scholars that have then gone on to do great work. Another way of thinking about impact is has there been a significant career change? Has a scientist all of a sudden become an artist, which is great for us. And this is what distinguishes us from other typical funding type organizations, where it's like, we're funding this specific type of work, you should do this work. For us, we don't have that, and we like to have the flexibility, or rather, we like to see the flexibility on the part of our fellows that they might change directions, or they might start focusing on another aspect that was maybe underlying some of their work. And that's really exciting. And we see that as a kind of impact of the fellowship too. What are some of the other things that we think about? Publications, that's kind of boring. But we will look at, has there been an uptick in publications and books and notices of books since the fellowship was awarded, as well as media mentions. If people are all of a sudden, having the press focus on them, we, think about whether or not there's some correlation between the awarding of our fellowship, as well as, or the correlation between the awarding of the fellowship and attention in the media. For artists also, there's a kind of inverse, where sometimes artists need time in their studio. So there could be a total drop in productivity, which can also be exciting. I think when we think about impact, we're really trying to have an expansive idea of what that could mean with long time horizons. So Angie Deka, the woman who was producing the murals for CHA, I think she used her fellowship time. She actually was starting to get a lot of attention, and a market was really starting to build up around her. And when that starts to happen, in some ways it hinders creativity, because the market is demanding a certain type of work. And in order to keep on, paying the bills for the studio, you have to keep on making this work, which will sell. And the MacArthur Fellowship, in that case, it came in and let her sort of take a step back from that and continue to experiment and do new things in the studio that might not have a market yet, but we want to encourage that sort of work too. So that's another kind of maybe counterintuitive way of looking at impact, but it's something that we're interested in. And yeah, to your broader point, impact is something that we really are interested in, but we also want to maintain the no strings attached. And as soon as we start defining metrics and putting those out there into the world, I think that would skew the program.
I'm going to paraphrase a comment that was made by Susan Alito and then ask her question. It would seem too, besides the quantitative type research for impact, there's also the qualitative impact of stories and media, those types of things that show impact.
Yeah.
And what Susan has asked is, has the number of fellows increased over the years, or do they stay steady at a certain number?
So actually, they have decreased in the number of years. In the very early years, in 1981, for instance, there were 2 classes of fellows. And I think each class had around 20 to 25. So in total, in 1981, I believe there were 40 or so fellows. I don't know when that stopped, having the 2 classes per year, but relatively early, maybe within the first 5-10 years, the program moved over to awarding 1 class of fellows. And since that time, it has held relatively steady at between 20 and 25. I think one year we had 26 fellows, but other than that, it's pretty constant, and that's how we maintain it. Part of that is budgetary purposes. That's our budget, but it also seems like a big enough number so that we can capture work in all kinds of different areas, but also small enough so that it's not so sprawling where an individual gets lost in this bigger group of people, because we really want to focus on and uplift the individual work and have that work in conversation with other fellows, work of other people doing things in different areas.
Rita, do you want to unmute yourself? I cannot read what you wrote in your question.
That was a mistake. Okay.
Okay. Oh. Well, our time is coming to a close. I do want to remind us that many of you were with us back in October, was it? When this program was originally scheduled, and there was a Xfinity power outage over and around Hyde Park, and I guess nationally. And so we had many people who could not get on to the Zoom. And so we just ended the program and then ended up rescheduling it. So thank you, Dawn, for you being here. And we greatly appreciate your time and spending with us. And who knows, we may see you in and around Chicago. We cannot self-nominate ourselves, so we won't bother with it.
And Terry, just one other observation that people may not realize: the MacArthur Foundation is a Chicago institution, so we shouldn't fail to mention that the MacArthurs were from Chicago, right, and started their work here in Chicago. Is that correct, Don?
Bankers Life and Trust was their business. So actually, John MacArthur was living in Palm Beach for much of his time. Yeah.
But it's headquartered.
Yes, it's headquartered here. It has always been headquartered in Chicago. And as I mentioned in the sort of overview presentation, the Chicago commitment is one of MacArthur's key lines of work, and that is enduring in perpetuity. So the MacArthur Foundation is committed to Chicago.
We just got a reflective comment from Judy Soho. Yes, that image of rewarding accomplishment for select 1 or 2 persons was my impression of the foundation. Thank you, Hyde Park Village and Don, for this informative presentation, clarifying the initiatives this iconic institution and making it more down to earth for me. And many thanks to the MacArthur Foundation for their important work in recognizing much needed positive influences in this world.
Judy, you said it all. Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be my thoughts as well.
Exactly.
And that was not a paid advertisement.
So again, thank you, Dawn, and thank you everybody for attending. And we're going to keep the Zoom open for for about 10, 15 minutes for those that want to stay on and chat. And Laura Crocky is the one who will be hosting that. And I want to mention that Laura has a big event coming up Monday. She has a milestone birthday. And I'll let her decide if she wants to share with you what that is. But Laura, we're going to hand the hosting over to you now.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. I proposed doing this because when we were in person at the drop-in, we had lunch. and we had time to visit. And we had time to share with each other. It's a little harder to do it this way, but we can have time to share things that are going on with us, reactions to the presentation. I've kind of envisioned it as being fairly open and free. Sometimes it helps to have some kind of structure of a topic, but we have a topic because we just had a wonderful presentation. I unfortunately missed part of it because I was at physical therapy. So anyway, I'm going to just kind of throw it open, or we can. My birthday that's coming up is my 80th. And I'm just amazed that I've managed to live this long.
Welcome to the club.
That is a milestone.
You'll be our centerfold for December.